Hey everybody, sorry I couldn't be there in person to give my presentation. I'm in Cuba. As I start this video, I came down at the invitation of a small group of people that really want to be involved, having a positive influence in their nation. And they don't know what the future holds, but it's a very historic time, certainly. I got here 6 days after the first ship came from Florida since 1959, so it's been very interesting. Anyway, I just want to start off by just saying that whenever I travel, I really try to take home those nuggets that I can use in the classroom. And I've had an extraordinary life. I've been able to travel all over the world for 40 years and been in more than 60 countries. I even lived on a hospital ship for a year and a half. And so I teach interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, and public speaking. And certainly for the first two classes, my travel experience has been really valuable in taking home lessons. So, for example, the first one here was the first day I arrived. Not only was I tired, but I didn't know there was an orientation, and so I spent most of the day just trying to figure out where things are, with the best restaurants to eat, that kind of thing, because I'm in an all-inclusive resort after having taught in Havana. Was creating a mind map, and so that's one of the concepts we talk about in those classes, creating a mind map from which we have perceptions and we live out our lives, just trying to make sense of the world. So that's certainly a lesson I'll be able to take back this time. So it's been fun. All right, so I have a few notes here. So I just want to say that I'm going to talk about 3 workshops that I did. One was the student engagement with Steve Spangler, and then I'm going to talk about non-cognitive dynamics of low-income first-generation students. That was a workshop that really had an impact on how I see our student population. And then the last one is Lecture, Light, Shine. It was a webinar that I took online and gained some really cool principles that I think are going to be very useful. So, the first workshop I want to talk about is the keynote speaker that we had at the August PDW in 2015, of course, with Steve Spangler. Steve, of course, is a scientist, but he's also an entertainer, and he understands the idea of putting entertainment and education together. I found his workshop to be incredibly inspiring, and although I try to be engaging in my classroom, I just found that he sort of encouraged me to really take it to the next level. So I thought it was fantastic. You all remember that he was using all sorts of gadgets to really grab our attention and really draw us into the topic, and then he would go and explain the science behind. So whether it was shooting toilet paper with a lawn blower into the audience, or his amazing technique for blowing up the balloons in ways that were surprising, was so fascinating. And I think that's what really grabbed me, was the idea of bringing something to the audience, to the students, that is a surprising twist on what they're expecting. You kind of shock them at times, kind of like he did with us. I thought it was really cool that he used the energy stick, and I was able to grab a couple of those, and I have used those in my classroom so much because I teach communication, which is all about connection. This gives us a really physical way to demonstrate how we're all, as people, connected in ways that we don't realize. And when you get the class to hold hands in a circle, and then you make that last connection with the energy stick, completing the circle, the students really think that's cool, because they really begin to understand that they are connected in ways that we just don't think about on a regular basis. And also how communication helps increase those kinds of connections that seem to be incredibly human at the very core. While I didn't do a formal evaluation on this particular exercise, I could tell by observing the expressions on the students' faces and their verbal feedback that this was a really helpful exercise. The other workshop I want to talk about was presented by TRIO on non-cognitive dynamics of low-income first-generation students. I think we all have a tendency to default to what we know. We certainly live out of our perceptions. And I understand the concept of privilege, white privilege, and other sorts of privilege. I teach those in my classes. This workshop really took me to a whole new level of understanding, to see where some of our students are coming from. They just don't have the tool set to do what they really want to do, and to be able to see these students with some more compassion and some understanding has really helped me in the way that I have interacted with my students, especially those that I see struggling. I learned about the services available to students. For example, the food bank and TRIO, all the incredible things that they do for our students, and of course counseling and other kinds of things. One of the things they talked about a lot was really seeing our students more holistically. I come to the classroom and I think, oh, I'm just supposed to be the teacher. And so to see them as whole people and to be able to help them and to send them in the right direction has, I think, been really healthy for me. For example, transportation. You know, they may or may not have a ride. They may or may not have a car that works, or money for gas, or those kinds of things. And so to be a bit more compassionate, instead of just saying to students, oh, you just need to figure it out and you just need to come to class, to realize the dynamics that it's really so much more complicated for so many of them because of the real challenges that they face. I also learned a lot more about our diverse population. I learned about the early warning system and began to use that. Of course, that's a button available on the homepage of ppcc.edu, and I have used that now for students that I see that are experiencing various challenges like transportation or food or emotional issues as well. And also taking a workshop recently to find out about some of our at-risk students and actually the liabilities that we have as faculty. We have an obligation not only to the students but also to protect the school and to protect ourselves, that if we see issues that we really do need to report them. I am a life coach, and while I understand the idea of asking personal questions in my coaching, and I do that in my classroom teaching, but this workshop helped me to apply those to individual students. So if I see a particular student struggling in an area, I can approach them, and instead of taking the approach of telling them what to do, I can actually ask them questions and inquire about their individual challenges, and that has been extremely helpful. Another thing that was emphasized in the workshop was the idea of really teaching the SMART principles to students, just the idea of really setting specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goals. As far as the assessment piece goes, I would say that this workshop gave me tools to help me retain students by early reporting, by using coaching techniques in the classroom. I have been able to keep students that I think otherwise would have faded away. The third workshop I want to talk about was a webinar that I took with Bridget McGowan Hawkins. It was presented by the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development. And this was called Lecture, Light, Shine. And it was taking the idea of classroom lecturing so that we could have really like energetic but low stress classrooms that with a lot of ideas to really get students engaged. I did some screenshots because it was a video recording of a webinar, and so I was able to do that just for my own use and being able to review those, but I just want to share those, but I also want to be upfront that these are screenshots from her actual presentation, so I'm not trying to pass them off as my own, but I think they were so amazing that it's worth sharing with those of you that are watching this video. The whole premise of this workshop was looking at different techniques to excite, engage, involve, and inform students. She suggests starting every classroom with what she called a fast break, something to really get the attention, to really get students' brains moving. She suggested that we have them take out a piece of paper and have them draw 2 columns, and in the left column they would put the key ideas that they're coming to class with. On the left side, in the in column, they would write down the key ideas that they got from the chapter that they are bringing to the class. And in the out column, they actually write down random thoughts that they're having. You know, maybe I'm stressed for a math test coming up, or I'm hungry, or I don't have money, or whatever the case may be. So then you would lead them through a very brief exercise, and okay, now we're going to focus on the in column and somehow kind of teach them that they can actually control what they focus on during that class period, so that they put those other things on a shelf and deal with the rest of life later, but while they're in the classroom, they're there to learn. Bridget talked about a traditional KWL, which some of you may be familiar with. I wasn't, so it was kind of new for me. So she talked about this, and then she proposed a new model. She suggested that before lecturing, you ask students what they already know. So that relates to some of the techniques that we have been learning about in the workshops related to the flipped classroom. Then what they want to learn. So that would be the questions that they bring, or the unclear things that they would bring to the class. And then after the lecture, you test the students on what they've learned. She proposed a bigger model that was KWHLAQ. So the K stands for what do I know? So they come to class, they're able to articulate either verbally or in writing what they already know about a particular subject. The what do I want to know? So what is it that they have for questions? What curiosities were aroused? And then H, how do I find out? And so then you give the lecture. Then after the lecture, you ask them, or you teach them to ask themselves, what have I learned? The A, what action will I take? And the Q, what new questions do I have? Another one she called the 3, 2, 1 shout out, and that's to get students into groups of 3, just have them discuss an idea or a topic for just 2 minutes, to identify one topic and then to shout it out to the rest of the classroom. So you can see that these are all like really quick little techniques. The second part of her workshop was about using the 10-minute rule. This involves breaking down your lecturing into bite-sized bits so that students have time to process them and let things sink in before continuing. She talked about how students only understand so much information at a time, and so we just need to give them that. So perhaps teach for 10, 12 minutes and then do a little exercise or do a little test and then come back and teach the next thing. Or facilitating a classroom that would encourage them to sort of tune out. We just give them bite-sized chunks. I like this image of the pineapple because she's talking about, no more than 3 or 4 chunks per session. She also talked about really encouraging our students to take ownership of their education, and I think this is fantastic. She encourages talking to the students about their education and really kind of addressing it so that you're really a professional in training, and that you are here doing education so that you don't have to be in school for the rest of your life. So Bridget shared that meaningful learning experiences, in each class we should have some sort of mix of the following: lecture instruction, of course; second, an exercise to reinforce the text; third, a quick write activity; 4, a discussion; and 5, a quiz. And the third area that she talked about was really kind of having to do with the energy level of the class. She called it turn it up a notch, is raising your energy voice. So she said what tends to happen is we start at the classroom with all this energy, and then it sort of begins to wane. And so at some point we sort of need to build in these energy breaks into our classroom time so that we start a new topic or a new chunk and we actually begin the energy all over again. So reset your energy level with each new chunk. I have tried the chunking with great success when I teach the Myers-Briggs personality profile in the interpersonal communication class. Before the students come to class, they take the test online, then they come to class. I teach on a particular dimension like the introvert-extrovert, and then I divide them into groups for 10 or 15 minutes where they use anything that's on their table to construct an exercise. For example, they have to design their dream office. So you see the introverts drawing individual offices with large walls and individual space and quiet, and you see the extroverts designing offices that are very interactive and fun and not a lot of walls and that kind of thing. Then after they complete the exercise, then they have to report to the other group what they did. So it gives the students an ability to understand their particular personality and their traits, but it also gives them the opportunity to understand how other people can be different and have different preferences. I found it to be a very, very successful technique in doing the chunking, and I've had students give me feedback that this was the best part of the course for them. They found it incredibly learning because it appealed to all the different learning styles and because it really helped them grasp the material. And in review, Steve Spangler's keynote session on student engagement was just such an encouragement to really ramp up the energy in the classroom and look for creative ways to explain concepts and to really engage our students. The TRIO workshop on really understanding first-generation students, and then this Lecture Light Shine by Bridget McGowan Hawkins. I think two things that have really helped me are one are these series of workshops that we're able to take, and the other is that at the end of the semester I give my students their own evaluation forms that are separate from what the school has them do, just to get feedback so that every time I teach a course it's better than the last time.